There is a particular kind of financial pain that is heavier than it should be, and it comes from taking the blame for something that was never entirely yours to carry. Maya struggled financially for years, and like most people, she assumed it was her fault. She was not disciplined enough, not smart enough with money, not good enough at her career. She carried that private verdict everywhere, a quiet weight labeled "my fault." What she could not see was the enormous invisible machine humming behind her, the systems, the rules, the structures, the way the whole thing is arranged, much of which shaped her outcomes in ways that had nothing to do with her character. This video is about that machine, about how much of what people privately blame themselves for was actually the system's doing, and why seeing this clearly is not an excuse but a relief, and the beginning of thinking more clearly about money. Because this channel has a particular worldview, one worth stating plainly. A great deal of what people experience as personal financial failure is actually the predictable result of systems working exactly as they were designed, systems most people never see, question, or account for. This does not mean nothing is your responsibility. Plenty is, and we will be honest about that. But the balance is badly skewed. People massively overblame themselves and massively under-account for the machine. Today, I want to help you see the machine, so you can put the blame where it actually belongs, which turns out to be one of the most clarifying and freeing things you can do with your relationship to money. First, the core reframe, because it changes everything that follows. When you are inside a system, the system becomes invisible. It looks like just how things are, like the natural order, rather than a designed arrangement that could have been built differently. Like a fish that cannot see the water it swims in, we cannot easily see the financial systems shaping our lives. So when we struggle, we attribute it entirely to ourselves, because we cannot see the water. But the water is real, and it shapes everything. The prices, the wages, the rules, the way credit works, the way opportunities are distributed, all of it is a designed environment, not a law of nature, and it exerts enormous force on individual outcomes. Seeing the water does not remove your responsibility, but it corrects a massive distortion, the distortion of blaming yourself for the current you are swimming against. Helping people see the water, the systems they swim in without noticing, is one of the most important things this channel does, because you cannot think clearly about money while blaming yourself for forces you never even see. I'm Theo, and this is a worldview that runs through everything here, that systems and psychology shape financial outcomes far more than most people realize, and that seeing this clearly is the beginning of both peace and power. So let's look at the machine. The first thing the system determines, before you make a single decision, is your starting point. And starting points vary enormously. Where you were born, what your family had or did not have, what you were taught or not taught about money, the opportunities available or absent in your environment. None of this was chosen by you, and all of it profoundly shapes your financial trajectory. Two people with identical talent and effort can end up in vastly different places simply because they started from different positions on the hill. This is not an excuse. You still have to run your own race. But pretending everyone starts from the same line and therefore that all differences in outcome are personal merit or failure is one of the cruelest distortions the invisible system produces. Your starting point was assigned, not earned, and it matters more than almost anyone admits. The second systemic factor is what you were never taught and then blamed for not knowing. Most people receive almost no real financial education, not at home, not in school. We have touched this gap throughout the channel. The essential knowledge about how money, credit, investing, and systems actually work is simply not provided to most people. And then, when they struggle from lacking it, they are blamed for their ignorance as if it were a personal failing rather than a systemic omission. This is deeply unfair. You cannot be justly blamed for not knowing what you were never taught. Yet the system produces exactly this outcome. An entire population undereducated about money by design, then held personally responsible for the predictable consequences. Recognizing this, lifts a blame that was never yours to carry. The third systemic factor is that many financial systems are actively designed in ways that work against ordinary people, not by accident, but by design. We have seen this throughout the channel, the friction that makes canceling hard and spending easy, the defaults set to benefit the provider, the products engineered around human psychological weaknesses, the way costs fall hardest on those with the least. Much of what people blame themselves for, the debt, the fees, the overspending, happens inside systems specifically built to produce those outcomes. Systems staffed by smart people, paid to make them effective. When you fall into a trap that was expertly designed to catch you, the primary story is not your personal weakness, it is the trap's design. This does not remove all responsibility, but it radically rebalances it toward where it belongs. The fourth factor is the sheer scale of forces outside any individual's control. The state of the economy, the job market, inflation, interest rates, the cost of housing, the availability of opportunity, these enormous forces shape financial outcomes profoundly, and no individual controls any of them. Someone entering the workforce in a downturn, facing high housing costs, in a struggling industry, is dealing with headwinds a person in better conditions never faces, yet both tend to be judged, and to judge themselves, as if their outcomes were purely personal. Acknowledging these forces is not fatalism, you still act within them, but pretending they do not exist, or that they are small, produces the false and heavy belief that every financial struggle is a personal verdict, when much of it is simply weather you did not create. Now, the crucial balance, because this worldview can be misused, and honesty requires guarding against that. Seeing the system is not the same as surrendering all responsibility, and this is where the reframe must stay careful. The goal is not to shift all blame onto the system and become passive, blaming everything external while doing nothing. That is its own trap, and it leads nowhere good. The goal is accurate attribution, putting the right weight on the systemic factors and the right weight on your own choices, because both are real. You are responsible for how you respond to your circumstances, even the unfair ones. But you are not responsible for having created circumstances the system handed you. Holding both truths at once, the system's large role and your genuine agency within it, is the mature and useful position, and it is the one this channel stands on. So here is the shift. Stop carrying blame that was never yours to carry, and start attributing your financial outcomes accurately to both the systems that shaped them and the choices you genuinely made. This is not about excusing yourself or becoming a victim. It is about accuracy, and accuracy is powerful. When you stop blaming yourself for the system's share, two things happen. You gain relief. The crushing weight of believing every struggle was a personal failure lifts, and you gain clarity. You can finally see the actual forces at work and respond to them intelligently, rather than just flogging yourself for not being superhuman. Accurate attribution is not an excuse. It is the foundation of both peace and effective action, because you cannot navigate a system you refuse to see. And notice that seeing the system clearly actually makes you more effective, not less. When you understand that certain products are designed to trap you, you avoid them more skillfully. When you know the education was never provided, you go and get it deliberately. When you see the systemic headwinds, you plan around them instead of being blindsided and demoralized by them. Understanding the machine is not an invitation to give up. It is a strategic advantage, because you can only work with, around, or against a system you can actually see. The person who blames only themselves stays blind to the machine and keeps getting caught by it. The person who sees clearly can finally navigate it. So the work. First, do an honest attribution audit on a financial struggle you have been blaming yourself for. Take one thing you carry guilt about and separate it into two columns. What was genuinely within my control and choice, and what was shaped by systems, circumstances, and forces outside me. Be honest on both sides. Do not swing to blaming everything external, but do give the systemic factors their real weight. Most people have never done this, and the exercise often reveals that a struggle they carried as pure personal failure was substantially systemic, which lifts a heavy and unearned weight. Second, keep your real responsibility and release the rest, deliberately. Own genuinely what was your choice, because that ownership is where your power lives, and you do not want to give it away. But consciously set down the portion that belonged to the system, the starting point you did not choose, the education you were never given, the traps designed to catch you, the forces outside your control. Carrying that portion helps no one and clouds your thinking. Releasing it is not irresponsibility, it is accuracy, and it frees your energy for the part you can actually change. And third, use your understanding of the system as a strategic tool, not just a source of relief. Now that you can see the machine, navigate it deliberately, avoid the products designed to trap you, seek out the financial education you were never given. Plan around the systemic headwinds you face, and make choices with clear eyes about the forces at play. Understanding the system is not just comforting, it is genuinely useful, because it lets you respond intelligently to reality instead of blindly blaming yourself. If this video lifted a blame you did not deserve to carry, that is exactly what these modules are for, and subscribing keeps them coming. And tell me in the comments, what is one financial struggle you now realize was more the system's doing than your own? Naming it out loud can be surprisingly freeing. Before you go, hold this with the balance it deserves, because it matters. Nothing in this video is asking you to become a person who blames everything on the system and takes responsibility for nothing. That path leads to helplessness, and it is not the message here. The message is accuracy, that you have been carrying far more blame than the facts justify, and that a great deal of what you privately judged as personal failure was the predictable result of systems working as designed. Setting down that excess blame is not weakness or excuse-making. It is simply telling the truth about where responsibility actually lies. So audit honestly. Keep your real responsibility. Release the blame that was never yours, and use your understanding of the system as the strategic tool it is. You are responsible for your choices, genuinely, and that responsibility is your power. But you were never responsible for building the machine you were born into, and carrying blame for its design has only ever weighed you down. The mistake so often was not entirely yours. Seeing that clearly is not an excuse. It is the beginning of thinking about money like someone who can finally see the whole board. Progress beats perfection, and accurate beats harsh every time. See you in the next one.